In the far reaches of the Andromeda Galaxy, on a remote mining colony known as Zephyria 9, the air was thick with the hum of machinery and the faint scent of ionized particles. The colony was a harsh place, a barren rock where the sun never shone brightly, and the nights were long and cold. It was a place where only the desperate or the determined dared to settle. And yet, it was here that Kael Voss, a rugged miner with a heart as hard as the ore he extracted, had decided to make his home. Kael had spent the better part of a decade on Zephyria 9, toiling away in the depths of the planet's crust, extracting precious minerals that were shipped off-world to fuel the ever-expanding galactic empire. He was a man of few words, his face etched with the lines of a life lived in hardship. He had little time for anything other than work, and even less for the company of others. But as the years passed, the loneliness began to gnaw at him, a quiet ache that no amount of physical labor could soothe. It was on a particularly cold and dreary evening that Kael received the notification. His communicator buzzed softly, and he glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing in confusion. It was a message from the Galactic Brides Agency, a service he had signed up for on a whim months ago, half expecting never to hear from them again. The message was brief and to the point. Your match has been found. Arrival in 48 hours. Prepare for her arrival. Kael stared at the message for a long moment, his mind racing. He had almost forgotten about the application he had submitted, a desperate attempt to fill the void in his life. And now it seemed his match was on her way. A human woman, no less, from a distant world called Earth. He had heard stories of Earth, a planet teeming with life and color, a stark contrast to the bleakness of Zephyria 9. What could have driven her to leave such a place and come here, to this desolate outpost at the edge of the galaxy? 2 days later, Kael stood at the spaceport, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his heavy coat, his breath visible in the frigid air. The transport ship had just landed, its engines cooling with a faint hiss. The ramp lowered, and a figure emerged, silhouetted against the harsh light of the ship's interior. She was tall and slender, her hair a cascade of dark curls that framed a face that was both beautiful and unreadable. She wore a simple, practical outfit, but there was an air of elegance about her, a grace that seemed out of place in this harsh environment. Kael stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "Are you her?" he asked, his voice rough and uncertain. The woman nodded, her eyes scanning him with a cool, appraising gaze. "I'm Elara," she said simply. Her voice was soft, but there was a hardness to it, a guardedness that matched his own. Kael nodded, unsure of what to say. He reached for the single suitcase she carried, but she held onto it tightly, her grip firm. "I can manage," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Kael led her to his hover truck, the silence between them heavy and awkward. The ride to his quarters was short, the landscape outside a blur of gray and black. When they arrived, Kael showed her to the small, sparsely furnished room that would be hers. She set her suitcase down on the bed and turned to face him. "Thank you," she said, though her tone suggested she was merely being polite. Kael nodded again, feeling more out of place than ever. "If you need anything, just let me know," he said, before retreating to the safety of his own room. Over the next few days, Kael and Elara coexisted in an uneasy silence. She kept to herself, spending most of her time in her room, only emerging for meals, which they ate in silence. Kael tried to engage her in conversation, but her responses were always brief and guarded. It was as if she had built a wall around herself, one that Kael had no idea how to breach. But then, one evening, everything changed. Kael was in the living area, tinkering with a broken piece of mining equipment, when he heard a soft thud from Elara's room. He hesitated for a moment, then knocked on her door. "Elara, is everything all right?" There was a pause, then the door opened a crack. Elara's face appeared, her expression unreadable. "I need your help," she said quietly. Kael's brow furrowed. "With what?" She opened the door wider, revealing the contents of her suitcase, which she had emptied onto the bed. Among the clothes and personal items was a small, intricately carved wooden box. It was beautiful, the craftsmanship exquisite, but there was something about it that seemed off. The wood was dark, almost black, and there were strange symbols etched into its surface, symbols that seemed to shift and change when you looked at them too closely. "I can't open it," Elara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've tried everything, but it won't budge." Kael stepped into the room, his eyes fixed on the box. He reached out to touch it, but Elara's hand shot out, stopping him. "Be careful," she warned. "It's not ordinary." Kael nodded, his curiosity piqued. He examined the box more closely, running his fingers over the symbols. They were cold to the touch, and there was a faint hum emanating from the box, a sound that seemed to resonate deep within his chest. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice low. Elara hesitated, then sighed. "It was my mother's," she said. "She gave it to me before I left Earth. She said it was important, that it contained something valuable. But she never told me how to open it." Kael frowned, his mind racing. He had heard stories of ancient artifacts, objects imbued with strange powers, but he had never seen one in person. And now, here it was, sitting on Elara's bed, its secrets tantalizingly out of reach. "Let me try," he said, his voice firm. Elara nodded, stepping back to give him space. Kael took a deep breath, then placed his hands on either side of the box. He closed his eyes, focusing on the hum, letting it guide him. Slowly, he began to apply pressure, his fingers moving over the symbols, tracing their patterns. The hum grew louder, more insistent, and then with a soft click, the box opened. Kael's eyes snapped open, and he stared at the contents of the box. Inside was a small, glowing crystal, its light pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The air around it seemed to shimmer, and Kael felt a strange warmth spread through him, a feeling of peace and contentment that he hadn't felt in years. Elara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Kael nodded, unable to tear his eyes away from the crystal. "What is it?" he asked. Elara shook her head. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I think it's meant for you." Kael looked at her, confused. "For me?" Elara nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of awe and sadness. "My mother said it would find its rightful owner. And now it has." Kael reached into the box and picked up the crystal. As soon as his fingers touched it, a surge of energy coursed through him, and he felt a connection, a bond that he couldn't explain. It was as if the crystal had been waiting for him, as if it had always been meant to be his. Elara watched him, her expression softening. For the first time since her arrival, the coldness in her eyes had melted away, replaced by something warmer, something more vulnerable. "Thank you," she said softly, "for helping me." Kael smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "You're welcome."